In the early spring of 202 BC, in Dingtao, south of the Yellow River in China, a coronation ceremony that would change the course of East Asian civilization was taking place. The air was filled with the lingering chill of winter and the smell of smoke from a war that had just ended. The great Han Empire was proclaimed. However, contrary to the imaginations of later generations, this ceremony, which established a 400-year imperial foundation and influenced Chinese history for the next 2,000 years, was rather hasty and unstructured. Generals and roughnecks from the army camps used their skills in building fortifications to pile up a crude platform of rammed earth in a field beside a tributary of the Yellow River. A man over 50, of low birth, his face weathered by wind and frost, Liu Bang, walked past the ranks of fully armed guards. Under the gaze of all present, he ascended the high platform alone. At the altar atop the platform, he read an edict to the heavens, stating his identity and declaring that he had received the mandate of heaven. Then he lifted the imperial jade seal he had obtained from the first emperor of Qin and became the new emperor. On the spot, he decreed that his wife, Liu Ji, be crowned empress, his eldest legitimate son, Liu Ying, be named crown prince, and his deceased mother be honored as empress dowager. And then, the ceremony ended. There were no song and dance performances, no military parades, no public worship or secular revelry, and certainly no floats or processions. This historical moment is filled with immense irony, and it constitutes one of the most fascinating riddles in Chinese political history. If we examine this new emperor through a traditional moral prism, we find he is almost a perfect negative example. In the writings of orthodox Confucian scholars, or by the standards of universal chivalry, Liu Bang's resume is a litany of shamelessness. In his youth, he was a village loafer, idle and lazy. During his escape, to lighten his carriage, he shamelessly kicked his own children off the vehicle. When his father was captured by the enemy and threatened with being boiled into meat soup, he playfully asked for a share of the broth. He was full of contempt for intellectuals, once even snatching a Confucian scholar's hat and urinating in it. Standing against him was Xiang Yu, the overlord of Chu, high-born, invincible in battle, and deeply sentimental. Yet, in the end, it was this utterly shameless Liu Bang who stood at the pinnacle of power, accepting the cheers of "Long live," while the perfect hero, Xiang Yu, met a tragic end by slitting his own throat by the Wu River. Besides Xiang Yu, there was Han Xin, known as the God of War, Xiao He, the model for civil administration for all ages, Zhang Liang, who was wiser than Zhuge Liang, and countless descendants of kings and nobles from the 6 states. Why? Why did history choose a shameless man?
Hello everyone, and welcome back to China Puzzle. I am ZYQ. Why was Liu Bang successful? This is not just a question of Chinese history. It is a universal proposition, highly relevant to the nature of power, the standards of success, and the logic of how society operates. When Western historians and political observers analyze this phenomenon, they often think of Machiavelli's The Prince. Liu Bang's victory is seen as a crushing victory of cold pragmatism over romantic heroism. There is some truth to this, but we prefer to deeply analyze the personal qualities and characteristics of Liu Bang to interpret the inevitability and contingency of his success. We will use a reverse chronological approach to step-by-step review the 7-year rise of this shameless emperor to see what he did right, or rather what traits he possessed.
Just over a month before this coronation ceremony, in a snow-covered canyon called Gaixia not far away, Liu Bang's greatest enemy, the universally acknowledged strongest man, Xiang Yu, the overlord of Chu, and his army of 100,000 were in a desperate situation. This was not a simple military encirclement, but the perfect execution of the ambush from 10 sides tactic meticulously designed by the Han commander Han Xin. The Han army used the terrain of Gaixia to set up layers of defense and ambushes. According to historical records, the total strength of the Han army reached a staggering 600,000, while the Chu army was not only at an absolute numerical disadvantage, but also out of food and low on morale. Then it was music, not swords, that destroyed the crumbling defense line of the Chu army. In the cold night, folk songs from the land of Chu suddenly rang out from the Han camps. This is the famous idiom, "Songs of Chu on four sides." This was by no means impromptu entertainment by Han soldiers. It was a devastating psychological warfare campaign planned by the Han army. These songs sent two fatal signals to the besieged Chu army. Strategic despair. The fact that there were so many Chu people in the Han army meant that the Chu homeland in the rear had completely fallen, and resistance was meaningless. Nostalgic blow. The mournful local accents awakened the soldiers' extreme longing for home and family, disintegrating their will to fight to the death. The Chu army's will to resist collapsed completely. The overlord Xiang could only lead 800 cavalrymen to break out, eventually slitting his throat by the Wu River. The 4-year Chu-Han contention ended, and Liu Bang effectively seized the world. But there is a very amazing fact. This battle was almost the only victory Liu Bang achieved in a head-to-head confrontation with Xiang during the 4 years of war. Let's briefly review their record over those 4 years. 4 years ago, Liu Bang shamelessly raided Xiang capital while Xiang was away. While he was gloating, the overlord returned with 30,000 elite troops and crushed 560,000 Han and allied troops. In the same year, Xiang attacked Liu Bang's base in Guanzhong. Liu Bang bet everything, mobilizing the old and weak to barely hold the line. 3 years ago, the two sides fought a protracted war at Xingyang. Liu Bang won no victories and abandoned the city to flee multiple times. 1 year ago, Liu Bang tore up the peace treaty and pursued the retreating Xiang, only to be counterattacked and sent fleeing in disarray. In short, in the struggle for hegemony, as long as it was a battle Xiang participated in personally, he won 99% of the time. He only lost one, but that was the decisive battle that settled the fate of the empire. Regarding the strategic and tactical gains and losses of the two, we will interpret them in detail in other videos. Here, we must point out an irrefutable fact. Although Liu Bang lost 99% of the battles, he 100% undoubtedly won the war against the overlord Xiang. Before this, none of Xiang enemies had achieved this. Therefore, Liu Bang's Han dynasty was built on the basis of comprehensive, complete military victory. When he ascended the throne, there was not a single open enemy within the entire scope of China capable of rivaling him. This point far exceeds the later unified dynasties like the Tang, Song, Ming, and Qing. When they claimed to have received the mandate, they had not actually completed the war to seize the whole country.
In the historical view of mainland China, there is an interesting point. The so-called mandate of heaven, or the legitimacy of rule, is closely related to the difficulty of founding a dynasty. If a dynasty can beat all rivals under heaven and complete unification through military war, its reign will naturally be long. If unification is achieved through coups or compromises, then the acquisition of the state is improper, its legitimacy is questionable, and its continuity will be problematic. At least from the perspective of Chinese history, this view seems to be confirmed by all facts. 2,000 years later, Mao Zedong said a sentence that is regarded as a standard by communists, which actually means the same thing. Political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. Liu Bang clearly understood this truth very well. Looking back at his war with Xiang, he almost never considered compromise or dividing the land to rule. He understood that from the beginning this was a life and death struggle. So he was the one who actively broke the peace, and he was the one who actively tore up the peace treaty. He understood that what is gained by compromise and concession is far less lasting than winning everything. The desire and ambition for victory, or rather for survival, made him fight on despite repeated defeats, until finally, victory.
This desire and ambition are essential qualities for almost anyone who achieves great things. We can ask ourselves, do we settle for momentary stability? Do we have the confidence to rise again when facing endless failures? Do we become paralyzed by complacency after achieving some achievement or stabilizing a situation? Do we have the shameless determination to win it all? So we must ask another question. Although the Overlord won almost all the battles, why did he lose the final decisive one? This is a question of strategy and tactics. Although this war took place 2,000 years ago, if we examine all wars in human history, there is a tactic that is almost omnipresent: the hammer and anvil tactic, fixing the enemy frontally and flanking from the side or rear. Or in modern gaming terms, tank and DPS. Examining the Chu-Han War, this is almost the paradigm of this method, except Liu Bang elevated it from a tactical level to a strategic level. The anvil. The troops responsible for pinning down the enemy on the front. Their task is not to defeat the enemy, but to hold their ground, sucking in the enemy's main force like an iron anvil, forcing the enemy to engage frontally so they cannot move or turn. Corresponding to the Chu-Han War, Liu Bang. He pinned Xiang Yu down on the frontal battlefield, acting as the iron anvil. The hammer, the mobile force responsible for outflanking. When the enemy is nailed to the anvil, this force launches a fatal blow from the flank or rear, smashing the enemy against the anvil like a hammer. Corresponding to the Chu-Han War, Han Xin and Peng Yue, Han Xin sweeping from the north and finally flanking south, was the iron hammer swinging down. Let's focus on 203 BC. Early in this year, both sides were exhausted from the long war. Xiang Yu, who had the tactical advantage, encountered strategic worries. The war had entered a long and cruel stalemate. Although Xiang Yu still maintained a tactical advantage on the battlefield, his logistics line had been cut off by Peng Yue's guerrilla forces, and food was running low. Liu Bang, although defeated repeatedly, relied on Xiaohe's blood transfusion from Guanzhong and the grain from the Ao granary to remain as tenacious as a cockroach. More importantly, while Xiang Yu swept the Han army on the frontal battlefield and even captured Liu Bang's wife and father, Han Xin was about to pacify the state of Qi in the north, posing a huge strategic threat to the state of Chu in the south. In this deadlock, Xiang Yu agreed to make peace. The two sides reached the famous Treaty of Hong Canal. The Hong Canal would be the boundary. West of the canal belonged to Han, east to Chu. They would divide the world and cease hostilities. For Xiang Yu, steeped in the spirit of aristocracy, a contract was sacred. After releasing Liu Bang's family, he kept his promise and led his army east, preparing to return to his capital, Pengcheng, to rest and recuperate. In his view, the war was over. However, for Liu Bang, born shameless, a contract was nothing more than a piece of waste paper. Its value lay only in the benefits it could bring. When news of Xiang Yu's withdrawal came, Liu Bang originally intended to withdraw his troops back to Guanzhong. But at this time, his two great strategists, Zhang Liang and Chen Ping, proposed an extremely vicious but extremely precise strategic suggestion. Now Han possesses most of the world. The feudal lords have submitted, while the Chu army is exhausted and short of food. This is the time heaven destroys Chu. If we do not take this opportunity to destroy him, it is like rearing a tiger to cause trouble in the future. This was the ultimate choice between morality and interest. Choosing morality meant abiding by the treaty and letting Xiang Yu go, which could mean decades of division and endless war. Choosing interest meant shameless betrayal, stabbing him in the back, but having the chance to unify the world once and for all.
Liu Bang barely hesitated. He immediately tore up the treaty on which the ink was barely dry and ordered the whole army to pursue the retreating, unsuspecting Chu army. Interestingly, 2,000 years later in China, when the Kuomintang proposed to divide rule with the communists along the Yangtze River, Mao Zedong said another famous line: "With power and to spare, we must pursue the tottering foe and not ape Xiang Yu the conqueror seeking idle fame."
So Liu Bang broke his faith. So the Han army actively pursued. And so Liu Bang lost again. Although Xiang Yu was caught off guard, the enraged overlord launched a counterattack and, unsurprisingly, defeated Liu Bang again. But Liu Bang continued to display his talent for fighting on after defeat. He built a strong fortification at Guling to hold firm. At the same time, he sent generals to outflank the Chu army's rear, seize strategic points, and persuade Chu generals to surrender. While Xiang Yu, in his fury, attacked Liu Bang's camp at Guling to no avail, the Han army's multi-pronged pincer offensive had already unfolded smoothly. When the overlord finally realized he had fallen into an encirclement, much like Field Marshal Paulus at Stalingrad, it was too late to order a retreat. If the Han troops sent by Liu Bang to outflank the Chu rear were a tactical hammer, by the end of this year, the armies led by King of Qi, Han Xin, and King of Liang Peng Yue had arrived on the battlefield. The strategic hammer was in position. A total of 600,000 troops surrounded 100,000 Chu troops at Gaixia. The fatal blow was about to fall. Even if examined against all the founding emperors in Chinese history, Liu Bang's military ability is top tier. First, his own combat power was certainly not low. Historical records state that when he was a precinct chief, he often bullied his colleagues physically. Later, starting from the uprising in Pei County, he visited the front lines of almost every battle and was seriously wounded by arrows twice. In this regard, he had the ruthlessness of a gang leader in a street fight. We have to point out a fact. Liu Bang's military ability should be above Xiang Yu's. The only person he truly feared was Han Xin. But the two have no record of fighting each other. As for everyone else, none were his match on the battlefield. This point would be verified one by one in the years that followed. But most importantly, the hammer and anvil strategy he executed was unrivaled in that era. The reason he could persist, despite losing to Xiang Yu again and again, was simply two things. One was Xiao constantly replenishing his blood from the great rear, making him like a tank with a healer, possessing an infinite health bar. The other was that he gave free rein to Han Xin, Peng Yue, Ying Bu, and others to detour to the rear, constantly achieving victories against forces other than Xiang Yu, bringing irreplaceable strategic value. Like a competent damage dealer, DPS, they accumulated advantages until the final blow. However, we must point out that this genius, hammer and anvil strategy, was not Liu Bang's original creation. The earliest idea was proposed by Han Xin and actively promoted and perfected by Zhang Liang. And as we just said, without Xiao He's continuous blood transfusion from the rear, and without the victories of Han Xin and others on the battlefield, even the most genius military concept would be just talk. So the next question surfaces. Why were these geniuses in politics, military, economics, and diplomacy willing to obey this shameless man? 204 BC. This was Liu Bang's most wretched year. In May, Xiang Yu's army broke through the Han defense line and besieged Liu Bang tightly in Xinjiang. The Han army was out of food, with no hope of outside aid. Liu Bang was in imminent danger. On a dark and windy night, the east gate of Xinjiang opened wide. A carriage which could only be used by a king, hung with a yellow canopy and decorated with yak tails, slowly drove out. The person in the carriage wore the Han King's dragon robes. The soldiers beside him shouted, "The city is out of food! The King of Han surrenders!" The Chu soldiers thought the war was over, shouted, "Long live!" and flocked to the east gate to watch the surrendering rival. Xiang Yu heard the news and immediately rushed to the east gate, but he was furious. The person wearing the royal robes was not Liu Bang at all, but one of his generals, Ji Xin. Xiang Yu had even seen him at the feast at Hong Gate. Meanwhile, taking advantage of the Chu army's attention being completely attracted by the spectacle at the east gate, Liu Bang took dozens of trusted cavalrymen and quietly broke out from the west gate, escaping to Chengao. Xiang Yu, in his rage, had not completely lost his reason. He admired Ji Xin's loyalty and righteousness and wanted to recruit him, but Ji Xin refused to submit and was eventually burned alive.
The shock of this story is exactly the same as our previous question. Why were they willing? For thousands of years, historians have discussed this core question. Why were so many outstanding talents willing to follow Liu Bang? Amidst the long discussion, a core view gradually took shape. Under Liu Bang's shameless appearance, he possessed another quality: Jianghu loyalty, brotherhood, and personal charisma. Although Liu Bang was arrogant to Confucian scholars, he often showed an infectious affinity to the brothers around him, his childhood friends, and comrades who fought for the world together. He could call out soldiers' names and drink wine from large bowls with dog butchers like Fan Kuai. This big brother style of leadership made his subordinates willing to die for him. However, would you really die for someone just because of their charisma? We believe that even behind the most fanatical personality cult, there is a logic. This person, or the object of worship, must have abilities beyond ordinary people, allowing people to see hope and be willing to follow and be loyal.
Let's look at Liu Bang's subsequent performance. Although Liu Bang escaped from Xinjiang and saved his life, he became a commander without an army. His main force had collapsed, and the remaining elite of the Han army were in Han Xin's hands. At this time, Han Xin was fighting smoothly in the northern state of Xiao, holding elite troops. Liu Bang made a jaw-dropping move. He didn't issue orders with great fanfare. Instead, he raced to the border of Zhao like a fugitive, and then infiltrated Han Xin's camp like a stealthy assassin. He did not notify Han Xin, but shamelessly claimed to be an envoy of the Han king. In the early morning, while Han Xin was still asleep, he broke directly into his bedroom and seized his seal and military tally. When Han Xin woke up, he discovered that Liu Bang had already entered the camp and taken back military power with the tally. Han Xin was shocked. Liu Bang immediately reorganized Han Xin's troops, taking the main force to fight Xiang Yu himself, leaving only a portion of the troops for Han Xin to attack the state of Qi. This is another hot topic for historians. Liu Bang stole the seal like in a legendary novel and took back the military power of tens of thousands of people, and Han Xin, holding heavy troops, just nodded and agreed? This is actually not hard to understand. First, the core 30,000 troops of Han Xin's army attacking Zhao were all Liu Bang's old subordinates and base. That is to say, these troops were brought out by Liu Bang. Liu Bang was their master in their hearts, and Han Xin was just the leading general. This involves the issue of Liu Bang's personal ability we mentioned. He rose from a commoner, built up an army of tens of thousands from scratch, and visited every battle personally, risking his life. That is why he could exchange for the loyalty of his subordinates. Jixin, who died generously in Xinjiang, was his early old subordinate. If it weren't for Liu Bang, they might never have had a day of success. It was Liu Bang who gave them the opportunity. They were naturally willing to pay for it. Second, although Liu Bang took back the army he had temporarily given to Han Xin, he immediately appointed him as the Prime Minister of Zhao, gave Han Xin the power to requisition all remaining troops in Zhao, and ordered him to attack Qi, promising him a greater reward after conquering Qi. This is what we believe is the reason why Liu Bang can truly make people, whether old fans or new followers, dead set on following him. He is shameless enough to do anything, but he also truly gives everything. Here we need to follow the timeline to tell the subsequent story. Han Xin recruited a new army and attacked Qi. However, just as he reached the border of Qi, he heard that the envoy sent by Liu Bang, Li Yixi, had already persuaded Qi to surrender. Urged by his subordinates, he launched an attack anyway. Although he conquered Qi, it led to Li Yixi being boiled alive. After conquering Qi, Han Xin sent someone to ask Liu Bang for a reward, hoping Liu Bang would title him Acting King of Qi. How did Liu Bang handle this situation? He flew into a rage, furious. Then, he said, "What kind of talk is that? Han Xin, you are too polite, too humble. You have achieved such great merit. If you want to be a king, be a true king of Qi. Why be a fake one? It's not pleasing." So Han Xin became King Xin of Qi. 2 years later, when the decisive battle with Xiang Yu reached its most critical moment, King Han Xin of Qi and King Peng Yue of Liang both held their troops back. They were waiting. Sure enough, they waited until it came. Liu Bang sent a letter promising to share the world with them. So they turned out in full force, settling the universe in one battle, because they believed Liu Bang would keep his promise. Did Liu Bang keep his promise? He did, and he didn't. Regarding the fates of Han Xin and Peng Yue, we will tell them in detail in other videos. Let's briefly talk about Jixin and Li Yiqi. Jixin's son was made a marquis, and the family continued until the time of Emperor Wu of Han, nearly a century later, when the title was removed due to a lack of male heirs. Li Yiqi's son was made a marquis, his brother was heavily reused, and he was ranked 6th among the founding heroes of the Western Han dynasty. Okay, here comes another question. Not everyone can be moved by profit. There are always people in this world who pursue integrity in name or morality. Does this shameless man have a so-called noble, righteous side?
Xiang Yu made many mistakes in his life, but none affected his fate as much as this one. To rally the world against Qin, the Chu army once elected a descendant of the Chu monarch as king, becoming the nominal common leader of the various anti-Qin armies. After the fall of the Qin dynasty, in order to become the overlord of Western Chu himself, Xiang Yu actively honored this Chu king with the title of Emperor Yi, the righteous emperor. However, after growing tired of these political games and suspecting Emperor Yi of favoring Liu Bang, Xiang Yu first drove Emperor Yi away, then simply sent someone to intercept and kill this nominal master of the world. This is absolute proof of Xiang Yu's political incompetence, and it gave Liu Bang a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Before Xiang Yu killed Emperor Yi, the Chu-Han conflict was more like a fight between two dissatisfied feudal states. After killing Emperor Yi, the Chu-Han conflict became a righteous crusade to avenge the emperor. Liu Bang keenly grasped this moral high ground.
In 205 BC, before setting out from the newly recaptured Guanzhong to attack Xiang Yu, Liu Bang performed a grand political show. He ordered the whole army to mourn. He bared his chest and arms, crying for 3 days, and issued a fiercely worded manifesto to the feudal lords of the world, accusing Xiang Yu of treason and calling on the world to attack him together. This was an extremely shocking move at the time. In a chaotic world where might makes right, Liu Bang suddenly talked about great righteousness. The effect of this move was astonishing. The kings of Wei, Zhao, and other feudal lords responded one after another. Liu Bang quickly gathered a coalition of 560,000 troops and marched mightily toward the Chu capital, Pengcheng. However, as we mentioned earlier, Liu Bang was taught a lesson by Xiang Yu. After the 560,000-strong coalition captured Pengcheng, Liu Bang was immediately carried away by victory and began to enjoy himself day and night in Xiang Yu's palace. As a result, Xiang Yu led 30,000 elite cavalry on a long-distance raid, crushing Liu Bang's 560,000-strong army in half a day. The Sui River stopped flowing due to the corpses, and Liu Bang fled in embarrassment again. During this escape, the famous kicking children off the carriage incident occurred. To make the carriage run faster, he even pushed his own children off. This story has been cited countless times by later generations as ironclad proof of Liu Bang's cold-bloodedness and cruelty, that a tiger eats its young. But at that moment of life and death, this may have been an animal instinct under extreme panic, or a cold, shameless, rational calculation. If he took the children, everyone would die. If he threw the children, the old man could still run. As long as the old man lived, he could have more children later. If the old man died, everything was over. But the question we want to ask is, why, after such a disastrous defeat, where an army of 560,000 was annihilated and his family captured, did Liu Bang not collapse like Xiang Yu later did at Gaixia? The answer is not on the front line, but in the rear. The answer lies with Liu Bang's administrative genius left in Guanzhong, Xiao He. When Liu Bang collapsed on the front line, Xiao He, who stayed behind in Guanzhong, showed amazing administrative mobilization ability. With the regular army gone, Xiao He made an extremely cold but efficient decision. Send all the old and weak in Guanzhong who were not yet of draft age to Xinjiang. It was this reserve force composed of the old, weak, sick, and disabled that filled the defense line at the critical moment, allowing Liu Bang to stabilize his footing in Xinjiang and block Xiang Yu's overwhelming offensive. But do not think that Xiao He was an administrative machine used by Liu Bang to squeeze the last drop of blood from Guanzhong. In fact, historical records show that during his time guarding the rear, especially in Guanzhong, Xiao He carried out many constructions beneficial to the people's livelihood, stabilizing the state, soothing the people, supplying food, and keeping the grain roads open. In addition, he implemented preferential policies. For families with members fighting on the front line, he granted tax exemptions or reductions in corvée labor. He took special care of lonely elderly people and orphans of martyrs. Then, to restore production, he opened the royal gardens, parks, that were originally closed by the Qin imperial family, allowing the people to enter to farm, gather firewood, and graze livestock. This move greatly solved the people's livelihood problems and instantly won huge public support. In terms of stabilizing the elite class, as long as they had talent, regardless of background, Xiao He employed them. Xiao He's governance in Guanzhong made the ordinary people and the elite class, who had suffered from the harsh politics of the Qin dynasty and more than 10 years of war, realize that this regime was not a roving bandit, but had governance capabilities. Simply put, Liu Bang's army had a just cause. It was a Tang Tang Ji Shi, an army of justice and order. Liu Bang's regime was effective governance and was what the people wanted. This point often determines the final success or failure more than the ability of military struggle. This leads to a crucial management question. Why did someone like Xiao He, who possessed top-tier administrative skills and absolute control when Liu Bang was at his lowest, not replace him? And Han Xin and Zhang Liang? Why did Liu Bang manage to control these geniuses who were far superior to him? This is the Nanjing district of Hanzhong City, Shanxi Province, China, today. 2,000 years ago, this was the capital of the Kingdom of Han. But in 206 BC, there were no scenes of jubilation here. Liu Bang had just arrived in Hanzhong. This was not the treatment he deserved. According to the previous agreement between Emperor Yi and the various anti-Qin armies, whoever conquered the Qin capital Xianyang first would be crowned king of Guanzhong. Liu Bang conquered Xianyang, but Xiang Yu, who believed Emperor Yi favored Liu Bang, forcibly relocated his title, sealing him in Hanzhong and the remote Ba and Shu regions.
Liu Bang was so angry he wanted to flip the table right then and there. It was Xiao He who persuaded him to accept the title. Furthermore, Xiao He suggested that although the main location of the fief was in Ba and Shu, those two words were not grand enough. He suggested choosing Han from Hanzhong as the name of the kingdom, because Han represents the Tianhan, heavenly Han, the Milky Way, beautiful and magnificent. In the end, Liu Bang listened to the advice. The Han dynasty got its name from this, and the names of the Han people, Han ethnicity, and Han language also originated here. But who knew the beauty of the future? Everyone knew that this was not a reward. It was exclusion, suppression, and expulsion. Liu Bang was so afraid that Xiang Yu would not let him go, that when he entered Hanzhong, he deliberately burned the plank roads to show that he would absolutely not come out of the mountains again. Therefore, at this moment, the morale in Hanzhong was scattered, and generals were fleeing. At this time, the famous story in Chinese history of Xiao He chasing Han Xin under the moon happened.
Han Xin, a nobody who could only serve as a halberd bearer, a personal guard, under Xiang Yu, ran away in disappointment because he was not reused by Liu Bang either. Prime Minister Xiao He heard that Han Xin had run away and, without time to report to Liu Bang, chased after him overnight. When Liu Bang heard that Xiao He had run away too, he thought he had lost his last trump card and was as angry as if he had lost his right and left hands. When Xiao He brought Han Xin back, Liu Bang was still angry. So many people ran away and you didn't chase them, but you chased a nobody. This shows what? It shows that Liu Bang also had mortal eyes and could not recognize Han Xin's hidden God of War attribute at a glance. Xiao He replied, "Other generals are a dime a dozen. A talent like Han Xin is unparalleled in the world." Next comes the display of Liu Bang's character. Gambler-like boldness and absolute, shameless pragmatism. Like a gambler who was dealt a perfect hand, his eyes lit up, and his attitude instantly made a 180-degree turn. He asked, "Then make him a general?" Xiao Hu said, "No." "Grand General?" Xiao He said, "Good." So, on an auspicious day, Liu Bang set up an altar, fasted and bathed, and held a grand ceremony to appoint the general. The whole army thought they were going to be promoted, but they saw the usually inconspicuous, even slightly shabby Han Xin step up to the highest command platform. Please note, at this moment, Liu Bang had not even seen with his own eyes what skills Han Xin had. He didn't even conduct several rounds of interviews, background checks, or a probation period like a modern company. He dared to entrust the lives of the entire army to a stranger solely based on his trust in Xiao He alone. What kind of gambling nature is this? What kind of trust is this? Many of us may be wiser than Liu Bang in judging people, but in terms of using people, very few have his shameless, all-in heroism. Let's look back at the story of the lobbyist Li Yiqi, who was later boiled alive by the king of Qi. When Li Yiqi recommended himself to Liu Bang was sitting on a bed having his feet washed. Hearing that a person who looked like a Confucian scholar asked to see him, Liu Bang was angry. "I don't have time to see any great Confucian." He told Li Yiqi to get lost. Li Yiqi was furious and said to the attendant, "Go back in and tell Liu Bang I am the drunkard of Gaoyang, not a Confucian." Liu Bang let him in. Li Yiqi entered, saw Liu Bang washing his feet, did not kneel to Liu Bang, but only bowed with clasped hands, saying, "Do you want to help the Qin dynasty attack the uprising feudal lords, or do you want to lead the feudal lords to defeat the Qin dynasty?" Liu Bang cursed. "You bastard Confucian! The people of the world have suffered from the tyranny of the Qin dynasty for a long time, so the feudal states have risen one after another. How can you say I am helping the Qin dynasty attack the feudal lords?" Li Yiqi said, "If you want to lead the feudal lords to defeat the Qin dynasty, then you shouldn't be so impolite as to sit casually when receiving an elder." Liu Bang suddenly realized, so he sat up straight, dressed properly, shamelessly apologized to Li Yiqi, and appointed Li Yiqi as a strategist. Li Yiqi successfully persuaded the Qin army in Chenliu to surrender for Liu Bang. Afterward, Liu Bang titled him the Lord of Guangye. You see, this is Liu Bang's logic. I don't understand many things, but there are people who do. I am shameless enough to admit I don't know, and I will find the people who understand and then give them the greatest freedom. This breadth of mind to dare to completely delegate power in areas he is not good at to professionals is something Xiang Yu absolutely did not possess. Xiang Yu was suspicious even of his only second father, Fan Zheng, while Liu Bang dared to hand the sword hilt to Han Xin. If we look carefully at the people Liu Bang reused in the struggle for the world, many of them had flaws in their private morals or were uninhibited, and many were desperados of humble origin with no future. But Liu Bang truly achieved, ignoring background, ignoring private morals, looking only at function. But have you noticed the next question? Why is he always quick to admit mistakes? And why can he always listen to others' words? No one is born perfect. Emotions and desires are hurdles no one can escape. Liu Bang was the same. But his biggest advantage was he was shameless enough to change his mind. In October 207 BC, Liu Bang led his army to be the first to enter Guanzhong. When they arrived at Bashang near Xianyang, the king of Qin rode in a simple, unpainted carriage drawn by a white horse, a silk ribbon tied around his neck, symbolizing he considered himself a death row prisoner, holding the Qin emperor's jade seal and military tally in his hands, kneeling by the roadside to surrender to Liu Bang. When Liu Bang entered Xianyang, historical records state that he was truly shocked. Endless palaces, resplendent and magnificent. Mountains of gold, silver, jewelry, silk, and satin. Thousands of palace maids and concubines, as well as exotic animals, famous horses, and hounds. Human greed exploded instantly. Liu Bang felt this was paradise. His legs couldn't move. He issued an order that worried everyone. "I want to rest in the palace." If Liu Bang had really stayed, he would have become the second Qin Shu, or quickly indulged in wine and women and been destroyed by Xiang Yu. Just as Liu Bang was ready to lie flat on the dragon bed, two people stood up. This is the historically famous Fan Kuai storms the palace and Zhang Liang's admonition. The first to rush in was his brother-in-law Fan Kuai. He was a butcher by origin, speaking rudely and directly. Pushing the door open, he pointed at Liu Bang's nose and asked, "Do you want to conquer the world and become emperor? Or do you just want to be a rich landlord?" Fan Kuai then pointed to the luxurious scene around him and said, "These gold, silver, treasures and beauties are all poisons that cause the demise of the Qin dynasty. If you want the world, never touch these things. Get back to the Bashang camp immediately. Don't loiter in the palace." Liu Bang received a blow to the head. Although he understood in his heart, he was still reluctant and dawdled, not wanting to leave. Seeing that Fan Kuai couldn't persuade him, the strategist Zhang Liang walked in. He didn't shout like Fan Kuai, but advised from the perspective of the righteousness of destroying Qin. He said, "It is precisely because the Qin dynasty was cruel and immoral that you had the opportunity to fight here. Since you are eliminating tyranny for the world, you should show simplicity, solemn as if wearing mourning clothes." Then Zhang Liang said that famous saying through the ages, "Loyal advice jars the ear but is profitable for conduct. Bitter medicine is nasty to the taste but cures sickness. Please, you must listen to Fan Kuai's advice." After hearing Zhang Liang's words, Liu Bang calmed down completely. Although full of reluctance, he immediately ordered, "Seal the storehouses. Put seals on the gold, silver, and treasures. No one is allowed to touch them. Close the palace gates, dismiss some personnel, and lock the palaces. Return the army to Bashang." Liu Bang led the large army out of Xianyang city and returned to station at the Bashang camp in the wild.
In that moment, he upgraded from a man, a shameless peasant, to a qualified politician, a still shameless politician. After returning to Bashang, Liu Bang realized that not only did he have to restrain the army, but he also had to soothe the extremely panicked and turbulent hearts of the Guanzhong people. The people of Qin had been tortured by harsh laws for decades and needed a sense of security most at this time. Liu Bang summoned the renowned elders and gentry of the various counties in Guanzhong and delivered an extremely important political speech. He announced the abolition of all harsh laws of the Qin dynasty, retaining only 3 simple laws. He who kills shall die. He who injures others or steals shall be punished according to the severity of the crime. Then, Liu Bang gave a promise. "Officials and people will live as before. I came this time to remove harm for you. I will never violate you. Everyone do not be afraid. The reason I retreated to Bashang was to wait for the feudal lords to arrive and establish rules, absolutely not to cause destruction in the city."
This set of combo punches had an amazingly good effect. Historical records state the people of Qin were overjoyed. The people of Qin originally thought the rebel army entering the city would burn, kill, and loot. They didn't expect Liu Bang to be so disciplined and the laws to be so lenient. They scrambled to bring beef, mutton, and wine to the military camp to reward the Han army. Then that country bumpkin from Pei County, Liu Bang, had a stroke of genius, his political level exploding instantly. He flatly refused the supplies sent by the people, saying, "There is plenty of grain in the Qin treasury, enough for us to eat. I don't want to waste everyone's things." This was a completely different person from the nouveau riche who didn't want to leave the Qin palace 2 days ago. This move moved the people even more. The people of Guanzhong were completely conquered. They now had only one worry, fear that Liu Bang would not become their king. So we have to ask the next question. Why were even the common people worried that Liu Bang would not become the king of Guanzhong? The reason is simple, because at this time, Liu Bang was theoretically just a hired hand. What he said didn't count. Legally, he was a subject of Emperor Yi of Chu. In terms of strength, he was far inferior to the overlord Xiang Yu, who had annihilated the main force of the Qin army. Moreover, if we go a step further, Liu Bang could be considered a subordinate of the Xiang family. That was just a short year ago, in early 208 BC. Although Liu Bang had been elected as the Duke of Pei, he only had a few thousand men at this time. He led his army out to attack the surrounding cities, leaving his old subordinate Yongqi to guard his hometown Fengyi, Liu Bang's birthplace and his core base. While Liu Bang was fighting outside, the army of the state of Wei came. The people of Wei induced Yongqi to surrender, saying, "Fengyi was originally Wei territory. If you surrender to Wei, we will make you a marquis. Otherwise, we will massacre the city." Yongqi already looked down on Liu Bang, thinking Liu Bang was shameless trash, so he immediately rebelled and surrendered to Wei. When the news came, Liu Bang was furious. Fengyi was not only his lair, his family, savings, and grain were all inside. Liu Bang immediately turned his army back to attack Fengyi. This was a desperate assault. Yongqi defended the city to the death. Liu Bang lacked troops and siege equipment. Not only did he fail to take it, but he also lost soldiers and generals. At this time, Liu Bang fell into a desperate situation and fell ill, mostly from anxiety and anger. At this time, there were two roads before Liu Bang. Fight to the death, continue besieging Fengyi until he starved to death or was destroyed by the Qin army. Find a backer, admit he wasn't good enough, and bow his head to borrow troops from the stronger anti-Qin forces at the time.
For a shameless man looked down upon even by the traitor Yongqi, what was the first option? Never heard of it. Liu Bang decisively prepared a retreat for himself. He heard that the descendant of the Chu nobility, Xiang, Xiang Yu's uncle, had just crossed the Huai River. His army was in full swing, and he was advancing north. Xiang had tens of thousands of elite troops in his hands and was the strongest force in the anti-Qin coalition at that time. Liu Bang did not hesitate at all, nor did he struggle with the face issue of living under someone else's roof, like a scholar. To a shameless man, dignity is a currency. He immediately made a decision: go to Xiang and borrow troops for revenge. Liu Bang's execution ability was extremely strong. He didn't stop to gather the remnants of his defeated army. Taking Zhang Liang and more than 100 cavalry, he traveled day and night to meet Xiang Liang.
When Liu Bang met Xiang Liang, he did not put on the airs of, "I am also a regional boss," but put his posture very low. He frankly told Xiang Liang about his predicament and very cleverly described his enemy as Xiang Liang's common enemy. "You give me troops, I'll be your man and help you fight." For Xiang Liang, who was expanding his power, he needed a local snake, like Liu Bang, who had prestige and combat experience in the local area to enrich his wings. Although the aristocratic Xiang Liang looked down on a shameless commoner like Liu Bang, he still waved his hand and lent Liu Bang 5,000 elite troops, equipped with 10 intermediate commanders. For Liu Bang at that time, this was simply a huge sum of money. Having received Xiang Liang's investment, Liu Bang didn't delay for a second. He took these 5,000 fresh troops and killed his way back to Fengyi aggressively. This time, with the elite equipment and numerical superiority of the Xiang family army, Yongqi couldn't stop them at all. Liu Bang breached Fengyi, and Yongqi fled to Wei. Liu Bang finally recaptured his lair and family. From then on, Liu Bang followed Xiang Liang to fight south and north, officially becoming a member of Emperor Yi of Chu's anti-Qin alliance. Let's see, what characteristics of decision-making did Liu Bang show in this case? Extremely fast stop-loss. After the failure of the assault on Fengyi, he did not fall into emotional stubbornness, but quickly realized that he could absolutely not take it down with his own strength, stopped his losses immediately, and sought external resources. Disregard for false reputation. Many reckless heroes would rather be the head of a chicken than the tail of a phoenix. To survive, Liu Bang shamelessly gave up his status as an independent warlord and was willing to temporarily submit to Xiang Liang. This decision-making speed of being able to bend and stretch is beyond the reach of ordinary people. clear goal. He had only one goal: to retake Fengyi and survive. For this goal, face, identity, and status could all be temporarily sacrificed. Okay, by this point, we have summarized 7 unusual characteristics or qualities Liu Bang displayed during the 7-year war for the world. So we finally have to ask the last question. Why? Why did he possess these qualities? We have finally arrived at the origin of the story. Liu Bang was born into an ordinary peasant family in Pei County, state of Chu. Regarding his birth, historical books record legends with mythical colors, claiming his mother once napped by a large marsh in the wild, dreamed of meeting a god, and amidst thunder and lightning, a dragon coiled on her body, and soon after she became pregnant with Liu Bang. Liu Bang had a strange appearance, with a high forehead, beautiful sideburns and beard, and 72 black moles on his left thigh. However, these are forced legends added by later historians. In fact, Liu Bang in his youth was not a good boy in the traditional sense. He did not engage in production, disliked working in the fields, and looked down on farm work at home. He was often scolded by his father as a shameless loafer, even compared to his hard-working second brother. Liu Bang had a straightforward personality, did not stick to trifles, and loved drinking and beauty. He often went to taverns to drink on credit. Despite being a commoner, Liu Bang had strong social skills and leadership qualities. He was charitable, open-minded, and very familiar with people from all walks of life in Pei County. People like the dog butcher Fan Kuai were his iron buddies. Later, Liu Bang obtained an official position and became the chief of Sishui Precinct in Pei County. Although the position was low, responsible only for the security of a 10-mile area and receiving and sending off guests, it gave him the opportunity to contact the official system. During his tenure, he established a deep friendship with Xiao, the head clerk of Pei County, and others. Although he often teased his colleagues and was even shamelessly careless in front of his superiors, Xiao and others saw his extraordinary qualities and often protected him in secret. Later, the imperial court conscripted laborers to build the imperial mausoleum. As the precinct chief, Liu Bang was responsible for escorting the convicts of Pei County. Many people ran away on the way. Liu Bang estimated that at this rate, by the time they reached Mount Li, everyone would have run away. According to Qin law, not only would he be beheaded, but his family would also be implicated. Halfway there, he untied the convicts and said to them, "You all flee for your lives, I am going to flee too." The convicts were greatly moved, and more than a dozen strong men were willing to follow him to the death. 209 BC. In July, Chen Sheng and Wu Guang rose up in Xiang, and the world fell into chaos. The magistrate of Pei County also wanted to respond to the uprising for self-preservation. On the advice of Xiao, the magistrate originally intended to recall the exiled Liu Bang and use his power to control the situation. Fan Kuai was ordered to find Liu Bang, and Liu Bang immediately led hundreds of people to the city walls of Pei County. However, when Liu Bang's army arrived at the city, the magistrate of Pei County regretted it. He was afraid he couldn't control Liu Bang after he entered the city, so he ordered the city gates closed and prepared to kill Xiao, who proposed it. Xiao climbed over the wall and fled to Liu Bang. Facing the closed city gates, Liu Bang did not attack by force, but wrote a letter and shot it into the city, warning the elders of Pei County. The tyranny of the Qin dynasty has made everyone suffer deeply. Now the magistrate is fickle. If he surrenders to the Qin dynasty again in the future, everyone will be slaughtered. It is better to kill the magistrate, elect a child of the county as the leader, and respond to the feudal lord's uprising. The elders of Pei County were persuaded, so they led their children to rush into the county office, killed the magistrate, opened the city gates, and welcomed Liu Bang into the city. Pei County was occupied. Note, it was not conquered by Liu Bang, but a spontaneous reorganization of grassroots political power by the local people. At this time, everyone did not recognize Liu Bang as the leader. However, the state of anarchy could certainly not last. Everyone needed to elect a new leader. Historical records state that officials like Xiao were the people's first choice, but they were afraid that if the uprising failed, the Qin dynasty would exterminate their 9 generations, so none dared to take the lead. So, with no other choice, everyone turned their eyes to Liu Bang, who had just returned from exile. Liu Bang said, "Don't look at me. Don't look at me. I don't have the ability. I come from a shameless hoodlum background. If I can't protect you then, don't blame me. Find someone capable. Who doesn't want to find someone capable?" But the officials wouldn't come forward, so everyone repeatedly asked Liu Bang to come forward, and Liu Bang repeatedly declined. Finally, the fellow villagers got angry. "Stop making a fuss. Don't you usually have many legends and anecdotes about being divine? Besides, we have consulted the divinations, and God says you can do it. God says I can do it? Then I'll really give it a try?"
This is the origin of everything. In this small county town, a group of common people elected a shameless rogue who usually had the temperament of a triad boss as their leader. His birth determined his interest orientation. His life determined his way of thinking. He would use all behavioral methods unheard of and unseen by the original aristocrats to completely change the success criteria at the time of this era change. It is said that when Liu Bang was hiding in the Great Marsh, someone said there was a big white snake blocking the road, and everyone was afraid and dared not go forward. The drunk Liu Bang said angrily, "What is a brave man afraid of?" Without saying a word, he rushed up and cut the white snake in 2 with one knife, then walked away on his own. Later, an old woman came to cry, saying that her son was the son of the White Emperor, turned into a snake, but was cut in 2 by the son of the Red Emperor. This is the famous legend of slaying the white snake. This mythical story was of course to add a layer of mandate of heaven color to Liu Bang becoming emperor. But in fact, Liu Bang's commoner identity and that sentence, "What is a brave man afraid of?" were enough. In an era of violent turbulence, whoever can truly stand out from the vastest common people, whoever can truly make decisions according to the behavioral patterns most consistent with common people, whoever can truly be without dependence, without fear, without shame, without gain or loss, that person will be invincible. The heart of the people, this is the true mandate of heaven.